So far, so good. I want to thank all the panelists so far and all the presenters. It's been a tremendous conference so far. People have come up to me and told me how impressed they are with so many of those who have presented and what they've had to contribute to our better understanding as to what to do to improve workplace mental health. And I want to thank each and every one of you, not only for those of you who presented, but for many of you who've just listened and taken notes in the hope that you can take some of what these best experts have to say and translate that in some small way to what you do in your life, helping to try to advance mental health in the workplace wherever you work. So I want to thank you all very much. I want to say what an honor it is that I have a chance in just a little bit to present the president of the American Federation of Labor, Rich Trumka, who's president of the AFL-CIO, and he's going to be presenting shortly. We're honored, Rich, that you have come all the way out here to Chicago and are willing to join with us today. Thank you very much. I want to also, while I'm about to introduce our next speaker, pay tribute to someone who's been very instrumental for us all being here today, and that's Justice Ann Burke. Justice Burke was important 50 years ago. President Trumka, it's starting, along with my aunt Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the Special Olympics program, which was started right here in Chicago at Soldiers Field, where the very first Special Olympics game was held, and it was in no small measure to the fact that Ann Burke was there helping lead the way with my aunt Eunice to getting that done. And then 50 years after that fact, she was there to help Peter and I and all of those who've been helpful to bringing this day about at the Kennedy Forum, there to help us get organized with all of the insight and history that she had to bring to bear. And I thank you so much, Justice Burke, for your unique contribution. As many of you know, this last election cycle for governor was a very interesting one for all of you out here in Illinois. But not only for all of you out here in Illinois, but all of you who may know the fact that my cousin Chris Kennedy was one of those who was running to be chief executive of this state, which meant that I took a particular interest in how this race played out. I can say that in my family, we all stick together, and it's the way it's always been. In fact, when I was first elected, Mr. Trump, I had my cousin Joe in the Congress. I had my father in the United States Senate. I had cousins in the state legislature in Maryland and lieutenant governor. And so as a family, we decided to come together and say, how can we do this more efficiently? And we thought that maybe if we all went in with the same campaign material, it might work. And so we decided to come up with a sign, and the sign said, vote for the Kennedy nearest you. And we were going to pull some of those old placards out for Chris, but Chris gave a terrific effort, and I was pleased that I had the honor of joining with him in congratulating JB in the primary, and then working with my cousin Chris and having the honor of working for JB Pritzker in the general election. And I had to say, if it hadn't been my cousin Chris in the primary, given all the family connections that my family has to the Pritzkers, it would have been an easy ask for me to be part of the Pritzker campaign. But I didn't even realize that's why it would be an easy ask. What would make it an easy ask for me is the fact that J.B. Pritzker was all on board 110% with leading in the area of mental health and addiction treatment well early in his campaign, and to an extent that I have never seen any other candidate exhibit in any political campaign that I've witnessed over the years that I've been campaigning for candidates across the country. A truly exceptional campaign where he himself talked about his family challenges and ran a campaign that was very proactive on these issues, and once sworn into office as governor has already begun implementing that aggressive idea that we should no longer carve out, leave behind, segregate, and marginalize those with mental illnesses and addictions who are trying to seek help here in the state of Illinois. And so you came to hear him. I just want to say what an honor it is for me that he has decided to come to the Kennedy Forum, Illinois, and I want to extend our support to his administration because governors and every other office holders need a lot of help on a lot of different fronts, and he has a lot on his plate. So that's even more reason why we at the Kennedy Forum are a valued partner to this governor. He's going to have opportunities, perhaps, in the future for greater budgets with more monies coming in. And we want to make sure we're organized now that if he calls on the people of Illinois to spend those monies towards the cause of criminal justice reform, education, mental health care, that we in this state are organized to support this governor at the State House in helping him get his agenda for mental health and addiction treatment passed in the General Assembly. My pleasure to give to you the governor of the state of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thanks so much to Patrick. I'm glad to know I was your second choice for governor. That's the best I could have done with Patrick. I know it. Patrick probably doesn't remember this, but when I was a young whippersnapper and he was a young representative in the United States Congress, I had the chance to spend 10 or 15 minutes with him. It was around one of the conventions. I can't remember which one. But I was just so impressed with this young man who was demonstrating all the capability and the charisma of the great leaders in the United States. And so I just wanted you to know that even though we're around the same age, that I've always looked up to you. And I really thank you for everything that you've done. And I want to thank you for the fact that you've really shaped my vision of how to improve access to mental health care and healthcare in all of its forms here in the state of Illinois, and how you've helped me to think about how to get families the tools that they need to build better lives. And that's something that as governor, I desperately want to do, to help families build better lives. And so it's an honor to be here with you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. I also, of course, want to thank the Kennedy Forum of Illinois and the work that Peter O'Brien and Executive Director Cheryl Potts do, accelerating the mission of the Kennedy Forum right here in our state. How critically important is that mission? Well, you all know better than anybody. 1 in 5 Illinoisans experiences a mental health problem, challenge every single year, including people of all ages, races, and economic backgrounds. The fundamental truth of mental health is that everybody knows somebody who is struggling. Everybody. Yet, despite the universality of these battles, the most vulnerable members of our communities are too often left in the shadows. And the reason for it is the stigma and prejudice that comes with it. About 2/3 of the individuals who have mental health challenges in Illinois go without treatment because of their inability to access care, or because they fear the assumptions that come with getting help. For far too long, politicians from both parties have been too timid when it comes to addressing mental health for their constituents. You don't hear much talk about it, not enough. For far too long, our state has done too little as families have struggled. The national average of state agency spending for community-based treatment programs is $133 per person, but in Illinois, that number is just $77. Change is long overdue, but change is coming. Last Wednesday, Last Wednesday, I signed our state's new bipartisan balanced budget. Yep. And in it, by the way, just passing a budget in Illinois could seem monumental. But I am honestly particularly proud that my first budget as governor includes an $80 million increase in funding for mental health and addiction treatment. So it has an 18% increase in addiction treatment and prevention funding, and a 13% increase in funding for mental health services, unprecedented increases for our state in recent state history. A major portion of the new $80 million is being invested in our state's Department of Health Care and Family Services to help expand access to much-needed psychiatric services and to boost Medicaid reimbursement rates for mental health and addiction treatment. This is critically important for our future. But it doesn't stop there. We also passed an omnibus health care bill to eliminate a multi-year Medicaid backlog of over 100,000 applicants. And we brought transparency and accountability into the Medicaid system. Health care is a right, not a privilege, and I want to make it clear that the days of government bureaucracy standing in the way are over. I directed our state agencies to work together to break down the silos that always exist between departments that prevent people from getting the kind of services that they deserve. And honestly, we need to focus on families, people's basic needs, and look at them in a holistic way. That's why breaking down silos is so important. You know, people, when I became governor and announced that I was hiring 4 deputy governors, everybody said either, boy, this guy needs a lot of help, which is true, or they just said, we don't understand. We've only heard of anybody having 1 deputy governor along with the lieutenant governor, 1 deputy governor. But the reason that I did that was to break down the silos. Because you know what happens, and I think any of you who work in a large organization, you know this too, that department heads often don't work with one another because they view it as, well, this is my territory. That's your territory. And I want some of your territory. You know, I don't want to work together with other departments because maybe my budget will be diminished and their budget will increase. We wanted to do away with that. And that's why I hired 4 deputy governors, one of whom is here, and I don't know if she's in the audience or standing backstage, but I just want to call her out. Yeah, Deputy Governor Sol Flores. Sol does an amazing job bringing together, she is the Deputy Governor for Health and Human Services. And that covers a number of agencies: aging, health and family services, human services. We need people to talk to one another because we need to address these challenges in a holistic way, and she's doing a terrific job. There's much more that needs to be done, and we won't stop until our reality reflects our vision. My administration is committed to ensuring that health insurers are living up to the spirit of the federal and state mental health parity laws. These are laws, as you know, that were advanced by Patrick Kennedy and which are being used to make sure that all Illinoisans get the health care that they're entitled to receive. So the conversations that you're having here at the Kennedy Forum today are so inspiring, and they serve as a testament to the private sector's ability to drive systemic change. On an individual level, employers can be among the first to observe a change in an employee's mental health, and there's no question that businesses, especially large employers, can be one of the biggest drivers in creating a better healthcare system for everyone. Of course, mental health and addiction coverage are not issues unique to the working world. If healthcare is a human right, and I believe that it is, we've got to have a public policy that serves everyone, regardless of their employment status. So my promise to all of you in this room is this: your fight is my fight, and the government of the state of Illinois stands with you. And I want to thank you for all that you do, and I especially want to say I look forward to the work ahead with all of you. Thank you all for having me here today.
And welcome back to the stage, our MC, Kate Snow.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Governor. I really appreciate those remarks. Hope you all had a nice two breakout sessions and lunch, yes. I just want to say that this morning's speakers, I think, sort of laid the groundwork for what is happening at the intersection of mental health and the workplace, and provided kind of a comprehensive foundation for the next panel that I'm going to bring up, and hopefully we can take it kind of a step further from there. We know the issues, right? A lot of us in the room know the problems, but let's talk about solutions now and paths forward. Our next panel features leaders from Fortune 500 companies, disruptive tech giants, and the largest federation of unions in the United States. And we're not just going to talk about top-down leadership, we're discussing the importance of diversity and inclusion and the role that every one of us can play in creating workplaces that are safe, human-centered, productive for everyone, regardless of their lived experiences or their diagnoses. Please hold your applause until I introduce everyone, if you don't mind, and then we'll kick things right off. Richard Trumka is the president of the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, the AFL-CIO. Oh, can we wait till, we'll get everyone up and then we'll applaud. Go ahead. Nilka, that's your seat, yep, you're good. Nilka Thomas is the vice president of talent and inclusion at a company you probably know called Lyft. Nilka. Sonja Kellen is the director of global health and wellness benefits at Microsoft.
You sunk in there.
Unfortunately, your program says that John Stroup was going to be with us, president and CEO of Belden, but he had a flight issue and he's not going to be able to be here. So we're grateful instead to have Roger Crone, the CEO of Leidos, join our conversation. Thank you. Ooh, with a boot and everything, impressive.
Talk about that.
Okay. Did I say Leidos?
Yeah.
Which way?
In the middle of the word kaleidoscope.
Leidos. I knew I was going to get
Think
it
about
wrong.
kaleidoscope.
Ah, yes. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
No, you're welcome.
Let me start, Mr. Trumka, let me start with you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Welcome. You run the AFL-CIO. People have probably heard of it. You've got 12 million members?
12 and a half.
12 and a half million members. In all seriousness, that's a lot of power. What do they want to see when it comes to employers and the provision of mental health benefits and access to benefits?
Well, first of all, we've been at this for about 20 years now. We go back and we set up an agency in Washington, D.C. that originally took care of just our staff members. And it took care of literally every facet of their life, not just behavioral health, but marital problems, legal problems, financial problems, and everything to help them.
So not the union members in the country, but the
just
organization.
the employees of the AFL-CIO. Yeah. And then we began talking to our members, and we began seeing that members were being abused, that would lose their jobs because of SUDS, substance use disorders, and mental health issues. And so we started negotiating contracts. But before we did that, we made our contracts actually work for workers, so that the contracts, the health care that we have, actually is the model healthcare system that we want our employers to have. We provide sick days so that people can receive treatment. They can go to counseling. They can do the things that they need to do. Our healthcare plans are on parity. Mental behavior or behavioral health is on parity with all the other health systems that we have. And then we've tried to be a model as an employer. We've tried to actually ferret out the systems that work and don't work, to eliminate phantom systems where they look good on paper, but they don't
They're
do
not
that.
real.
So for 20 years, we've been trying to do this, and I'd like to tell you that we have all the answers, but we do not. We're working hard every day. We look at every avenue we can. We thank the Kennedy Forum for all the leadership that they've provided and the guidance that they've given us. And our members simply want to have the treatment that they need, whether it's with behavioral health or it's any other health problem that they have.
And let me just follow up, because earlier in the panel this morning, I don't think you were here, but I mentioned the issue for employees, right? That even if there is mental health care provided, it's often expensive. It's often not fully covered by your insurance. Even if you have a great paying union job, you may not get it all covered. And particularly in urban areas like Chicago, it is expensive to go see a psychologist. How do you grapple with some of those issues for your membership?
Well, for our employees, we actually pay for it. That's part of the health care that we provide. And then we try to negotiate that into the contracts that we negotiate with our employers so that they can provide the proper health. It's a struggle because it is costly, but it is more costly not to do it because people lose jobs, they lose time, they lose the skills that you have developed in them, and ultimately cost the employer a whole lot more than going back, training people to recognize the symptoms, teaching people to communicate so they don't aggravate the symptoms, and then providing quick treatment when we recognize that there is a problem.
Nilka, we talked about, I mentioned disruption. Lyft is certainly a company that is all about disrupting the marketplace. You've rolled out a new kind of innovative mental health program. Can you tell us about what that does for employees of Lyft and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I think about the work that needs to happen in organizations like Lyft and beyond, in some ways it's less about disruption and it's more about normalization. Like, how do we make this conversation a lot more accessible for everybody? I think the benefit of working at Lyft is we have a lot of millennials in our workforce.
Yeah.
And I think they come with expectations and demands that this is going to be a topic that employers are thinking about and are setting up their benefits, their cultures around. And so we have that push from the outside, but I think fundamentally what's most important is that we have a culture that supports this. We have a leadership team that is committed and invested, and then we're making that investment in the actual benefits themselves. So last year, we launched a partnership with Lyra Health that provides behavioral therapy for all of our employees and their families for absolutely free. So we wanted to make this as frictionless as possible so that when people are having issues that they're contending with, whether it's inside the workplace or beyond, that we're providing that level of service and support for our workers. And I think, again, I'll reiterate this point around leadership. We have to not only make that benefit available, but how do we ensure that people, A, know that it's there, and B, know that it's okay to actually take advantage of it. So a big leverage point for us is through our managers. Day to day, they're interacting with our workforce in the field, they're on the ground, and they are set up to be able to really issue spot and point people in the direction of resources and do that in a way that's very encouraging and not stigmatized.
Is what you're doing in the ride share world, is it unique? I mean, I don't know if other companies are why are you laughing?
Nothing is, I mean, it's all new in the right
It's all
world.
new,
Everything's
yeah,
new,
exactly.
yeah.
I'm just laughing because, it's just how revolutionary, better utilization out of automobiles is. And, what a difference that has made in the whole ecosystem. And
Yeah.
I was just thinking the parallelisms in healthcare.
And to that point, that maybe puts you in a position to be leaders in terms of this space. And as you said, a lot of your employees are younger people.
Yeah, I mean,
can drive that.
This is obviously a human issue. It's also a talent and a retention issue. If we're not offering this level of support for employees, we're missing the boat, because there is a reality that employees today think of these as table stakes, right? And so if we want to be able to engage the most talented employee base, we're going to need to make sure that we're sending a signal that we're going to take care of you once you get here. So I think most of tech has caught on that this is kind of baseline expectation, and we're following suit. We're a much younger company than Mr. Trumka, and so we haven't been at it as long, but I think the commitment is there, and we're starting to show that investment early on.
Roger, blunt question. Are employers doing enough?
We're doing more than we ever have. And, I would tell you, whether it be traditional healthcare, addiction, alcoholism, diabetes, mental health, we always, every day, in our company, we primarily do what we do through people. We have 33,000 people. We do more solutions and services. And, every day we go home and say, have we done enough across the board? And we're just on a journey, and what I'm proud of is we're doing more today than we did a year ago. We're doing more a year ago than we did 5 or 10 years ago. I think when we ask our employees, there are a couple of fundamental things. First of all, they want us to think about their total wellness. And of course, we all started in this healthcare business by providing them a benefit that dealt with disease and trauma, and the world has become more complicated than that. And there are some aspects we used to not cover, and I like to call it, we used to think of these as defects, but they're diseases. And so we've really moved beyond that, which is there are protocols, there are treatments, there are things we can do, there are programs we can put in place, we can put in counseling. And just as we do a lot of preventative work around disease, we can do preventative work around mental health, addiction, obesity, high blood pressure, cancer, and all of those things. I think it's really the responsibility of us as employers, and by the way, therefore we become huge payers, to do everything we can from a proactive standpoint to help our employees live well lives in a holistic way and deal, not just with like a flu shot, but we do financial planning for our employees, because we found a high correlation between the stress of I can't pay my bills this month correlating to mental health, addiction, alcoholism, anxiety, high blood pressure. So I don't think we will ever do enough, but we are doing more than we ever can. We're trying to do this and to get ahead of the curve and be much more proactive than we've ever been.
Sonja, I'm not forgetting you. Tell me about why you were called an employee benefit news game changer. They named you a game changer in your company, Microsoft, for a program that you have called Microsoft Cares. Tell me about that program, and is it something that could be replicated?
Yeah, so Microsoft Cares is really just our EAP program and the moniker we put around it. But we do wrap a number of services within it that are maybe unique. So, we've had an EAP for more than 30 years, but just a few years ago, we started to sort of rethink how we're approaching the EAP and enhancing it, making it something that can help us solve the access issue within mental health care. So just this past month, in May Mental Health Month, we've done a couple of campaigns. We took our standard EAP that's been around for a while from 3 sessions per year to now we offer you up to 24 sessions per year. So that's free short-term counseling available to everyone. But we also took it global, which is a big challenge for us. It's hard to implement any sort of health or wellness or any benefits program outside of the US in a consistent fashion, because different rules and regulations sort of drive what's locally relevant. But what we did was, sort of as a company, we believe that everyone needs access to this care. So we took our local contracts, and we're able to negotiate and bring out and offer 100% of our employees. We're in over 100 countries. We have 120,000 plus employees. Everyone now has access to free short-term counseling. And that was a pretty big deal for us, but also sort of speaks to our core values as a company as well.
Richard, it was mentioned this morning that construction workers have some of the highest rates of opioid substance abuse. I see this in my reporting all the time, that people who work really tough jobs, a lot of your members are struggling with dependency, and it affects the ability for employers to recruit in some parts of the country because people may not sign up for a job because they worry about mandated drug testing. What approaches have you seen that are working out there to deal with that specific issue?
Well, first of all, we believe it's going to take, we're going to have to radically transform the workplace culture as it is right now. We have high-stress people in high-stress jobs, whether they're on a construction site or in an office.
Yeah.
And managers and supervisors are going to need to be trained for the proper ways to address those mental health issues, and without adding to the employee's stress or playing into stigmas or violating their rights. They have to acquire the communication skills for workers that are affecting productivity, an approach that goes beyond threatening negative consequences or discipline in the process. And then right now, workers must be empowered, quite frankly, to talk about that stress and be able to ask for an accommodation. And then employers must be willing to make reasonable changes to deadlines, to schedules, to work teams, to spaces, and those needs like that. There are 3 ways I think that we can work together with employers. 3 things that I think that we need to do quickly. Because while I agree with you, things are changing, they still have a long, long way to go. 78% of low-wage workers don't even have a single sick day. And that means if they have a substance use disorder or they have a mental illness, that they have to give up jobs, they have to give up a day's work to get counseling or treatment or anything like that. So we have a long way to go. The first thing we can do is work together to prevent the stress from creating these conditions. The second thing we can do is intervene quickly when someone has a problem and make sure they can get treatment and then ensure that they get quality treatment and they have equal access to behavioral health as they do for any other mental or any other health issue.
And do you want to address the specific of substance abuse and how to help employers deal with that issue? Because it can be a resource issue.
We've trained our members, our staff people, and our leaders to be able to identify the early signals, the signs of mental substance use disorders or any other kind of order. And then we have a peer-to-peer program that we get them into training, and we have a peer-to-peer program that keeps them in the training. Because the biggest thing that happens is they go into treatment and they're out of treatment. So we use peer-to-peer.
Or relapse is very common in that.
Yeah. To keep them in the training and have someone there to help them, to give them strength, someone who's been there generally.
So it's a peer who's already lived the experience.
Exactly. Say, I was there, I know how you feel, and then talk them through them. And then we have employee assistance programs that help identify the program and get them into treatment before it becomes a job issue, before it starts to actually affect the employee so bad that their job is in jeopardy.
Roger, your company was recently awarded a contract to support research, I think, on the effects of deployments and career experiences on service members and their families as well. And I know you work with that population a lot. So first of all, why was it important to do that research, and what did you find?
Well, about 25% of our employees are veterans.
Wow.
And if you include the families and spouses of veterans is about a third of our employees. We do a lot of government work. We do a lot of work with the military. And we have been forward deployed military, whether we are at war or close to at war, but we have people in the AOR, even today, and this has been going on literally since 9/11. And the incidence of addiction, whether it be opioid, alcohol, other gateway drugs, is whole multiples higher among active military and veterans. So it was important to try to figure out why, what happens when you're in service, how do we deal with the transition from leaving the active military to going to civilian life. And what we have found, again, studies are still ongoing, is people who have especially been in a combat zone or the area of operational responsibility, the transition is very extreme. And the value system and the support system that they're used to when they're in the military, right, is just not there when they come back to civilian society. And they go to work for our company, and they don't have a platoon, they don't have a squad leader, they're not 24 hours in the military. I mean, we have them, for 8 to 10 hours a day. We can provide that support system when they're with us. When they go home, right, they have idle time, they miss their friends, they miss their buddies, they have a ton of idle time. They're trying to understand their new purpose in life. In the military, it's very clear why they're there. They have a strong sense of purpose, a strong sense of camaraderie, and when they transition to civilian life, that's gone, and there's a vacuum. And way too often, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines fill that vacuum with, it might be start out with alcohol, that becomes a gateway drug. Before you know it, the alcohol doesn't do what it once did, and they escalate. And we have found with access to prescription opioids, especially if you're in the military, you might have had an exoskeleton problem in theater, you might have had a bad shoulder, you might have had issues with knees, and so it's not uncommon for them to go get treatment for physical therapy, which might include a prescription for something like Oxycontin or Oxycodone or Tylenol 3, and it starts. And often they are more on their own in the civilian world than they were in the military, where there's a medic, there's someone who watches them, whose friends are with them 24 hours a day. Now they're more on their own. And without a lot of TLC, right, they can sort of fall out of the straight and narrow, and then they become addicted, and then they're in this cycle.
So what's the
employer,
solution? What do
right,
you do?
It's our role is very different than it is when they're in the military. There's all this preventative work we do. We do random drug testing and things, but it's really our first I think thing that we do is try to make everyone aware. And we know if they're in transition from active military to veteran status, we know they're at higher risk. There are some proactive things we can do. There's some, but we do the same thing. We have reimbursement for counseling. We have a great EAP program, but it's to make them aware that they are going through a transition, and therefore they have a propensity, right, to alcohol, to gateway drugs, to addiction, and then try to be much more proactive with them with those early months and years when they're transitioning out of active duty.
Nilka, there's a lot of talk where I live in New York about taxi drivers, and I realize this is they're not Lyft drivers, but there have been a number of suicides. It's been widely covered in the news in New York. I wonder why if you have any opinion on why that might be happening, and what could other agencies, what could other companies, drivers of all kinds, learn from a company like Lyft?
Yeah, I mean, those are tragic issues. What I'll say is that my focus is really internally and what we can do to make sure that we're creating the best possible experience for our drivers. So we have groups of people that provide that regular touch point and interface for our driver population. One of the things that's sort of very much part of our culture when you get to Lyft is you learn that everything that we do is in service of our drivers. So we've tried to build a very driver-centric culture. So what that means for people that are at the front lines, are dealing with these urgent and emergent issues day to day with drivers and with passengers. There's safety issues, there's pay issues. We want to make sure that there's a real sensitivity around what's happening out there in the streets, essentially. So how do we create a workforce that's attuned to those needs, that in every interaction can operate with empathy and care? One of the things that we do, our primary customer experience team that provide that frontline support through the phones is in Nashville. We actually bring twice a week on-site therapists there because we know that they're dealing with some really difficult issues. And so I think about this as a virtuous circle, right? If we have a really healthy, maintained workforce that we've really supported and propped up and day to day are giving them the support that they need, they're going to deliver that to the drivers and to the passengers in those regular exchanges and interactions. So I think it starts at home and then we extend that to our drivers and our customers.
Sonja, this panel is titled The Whole Person Approach. So let's talk about that. What positive changes have you seen that really address supporting employees in a holistic, whole person kind of way?
Yeah. I mean, I think that has been our focus. We changed our company's mission a few years back when we had a leadership change to empowering every person on the planet to achieve more. And so within HR, we think of that as we need to empower the people who empower the planet to have an opportunity for a life well lived. And that requires us to take a holistic approach. And so one thing we've really done a lot of in the last couple of years is starting to have the conversation. So during May Mental Health Month last year, we started a campaign called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And it was more of a grassroots effort from the benefits team to start the conversation and get the ball moving, make sure people are aware of the resources we have. Not only do we have traditional EAP through regular in-person sessions, but you can also do video counseling. We have text-based therapy, and now we're also going to have on-site therapy. So starting the conversation, making sure people know about it. But what came out of it that was profound and something we weren't able to anticipate was the number of leaders, both within HR and outside of HR, at the most senior levels, as well as sort of on-the-ground first-line managers, who started to step up and sort of own the conversation. They started telling their own story. They started making it a culture of acceptance by just sharing and being open about it. Not something we could have gone out and sought and implemented on our own, but once it started, we really leaned into their message, talked to them, and got them to amplify their voice and had them share more broadly where they were comfortable. And we ran the same campaign again this past May, and we've had just a tenfold increase in the number of leaders who have started it. And we do it globally as well. So we have, in some countries where this is even more taboo, they've really stepped up and started to own the conversation. And it's been very profound, I think, in just the shift in how people are willing to talk about it. And that then enables more people to access it. In the first week of this year's campaign, we had more people access our EAP resources than we had in the entire month last year. So it was just a huge shift in the number of people who were starting to get access to care, which is a good start. Clearly more to come.
Richard, let me go back to you. We're in a, Mr. Trumka. I feel like I should call you Mr. Trumka all the time.
Call me Rich.
Okay, Rich. We're in a room full of industry leaders and people who work in corporate America. What advice would you offer to those employers about how to make things better? I mean, everybody up here has acknowledged it's not exactly where we want it to be.
Well, first I'd like to go back and just redefine the magnitude of the problem so everybody understands what we're dealing with. In any given year, roughly 43.6 million people will have a mental illness, and roughly 21.5 million people will have a substance use disorder. Those are the figures of the Kennedy Forum. Of those people, greater than 50% of the people with mental illnesses do not receive proper medical treatment, and greater than 90% of the people with substance use disorders don't receive treatment of any kind. veterans, we lose approximately 20 to 22 veterans every single day. So we've started a program called Helmets to Hard Hats. We recruit people coming out of the military. We bring them into our apprenticeship program. We start them on day one with peer-to-peer, with awareness. I think what we can do, first, we have to understand that in order to correct the problem, we have to understand the problem. Two, that it's going to take a cultural change in the workplace. It's going to take some give and take by employers and employees. Unions, workers, everybody is going to have to give a little bit to make it work because it's so massive and it's so different in every single place. And then start the training on the three things that I talked about earlier. Training that can identify an impending problem. Two, you come up with a way to provide care for that program. Us working together to do all of those things.
Do you see?
And three, it's gonna take, the awareness is gonna take understanding that some of the things that we do and we take as gospel, scheduling, deadlines, some of those things, we're going to have some flexibility with those things to de-stress the workplace so that people can actually avoid the problem rather than us trying to fix the problem. And then the last thing I'd love for them to realize is when we partner and do this, it's actually win-win. They're going to get a more productive workplace, they're going to make more profit, and their employees are going to be a whole lot better off.
Do you all see the culture changing? I mean, I feel like there's stigma, but there's less, and that people are the old school ways from 50 years ago, even 30 years ago, where you just wouldn't even talk at the job about. You'd be embarrassed to talk about a mental health issue, or you'd feel like your boss would fire you, or put you on a lesser assignment, right? That was the reality back then. Do you all feel like that I mean, I look at the Lyft. I mean, I think you guys are at the forefront, but do you feel globally like that is changing?
Yeah, I feel like we are in a paradigm shift. This conversation is a conversation because things are shifting. Just last year, our co-founder at Lyft, John Zimmer, he actually went on the record and was very public about his own depression and his own dark moments that he went through during, particularly tough times against our competitor, who I won't name. And and that was just a wonderful example of a leader leading by example, really humanizing this and making him his own issues up for grabs in terms of conversation, and the signal that sent to others is actually really profound. So I think when leaders that are perceived to be infallible and unflappable at the top of their game, if they can say, I struggle with this too, how much easier does that make it for all of us? And the stats that Richard just rattled off in terms of the magnitude of the problem really suggests that this is all of our problem, right? Like this is happening extremely close to home. It's happening with us individually. It's happening to people in our families, and people that we're sitting next to day to day. So the fact that we can't talk about it is actually pretty ridiculous given how close and proximate it is to every single one of us. So I think that there is a shift that's happening, and we just need to continue to lean into that.
Does anyone else want to take that question?
I was just going to repeat, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, but it was in one of the breakout sessions earlier today, and somebody said the tide is shifting, the change is happening in the workforce, but the ecosystem to support it, like with the mental health professionals, hasn't caught up yet. Like there aren't enough people to help provide the support. The insurance companies aren't reimbursing them at a high enough rate to get more and more people into the network. So I think the conversation has shifted, and I think that millennials are demanding it, and which is great, and I think the leaders are stepping up, but I think there's still a lot of work to do to make sure people get access without getting the bills where they're paying all of it because they're out of network.
Yeah, I would say it is better, but industry by industry, it's complex. So about a third of our employees hold what we call a security clearance. So that means that they have had a background check and that they've been deemed to be able to access, classified
government jobs.
government information. And if you go to counseling, that's what we call a reportable item. So you would actually have to tell your security, your granting agency that you have been to counseling.
And does it count against you?
It depends, but it does create, again, for some jobs, we do work with the Department of Energy. They're a little sensitive to that as well. And if you feel depressed, let's say you were a veteran, you were in theater, you come back, you have a job, you've been working for 6 months, by the way, you're trying to kind of get reintroduced to your family and your kids, and you've been away on deployment, you've got bills to pay, and you feel a little depressed, maybe just a little. You therefore are more likely to go, well, I'll just kind of buck it out. I'll kind of get through this.
It's a disincentive to coming forward and getting treatment.
Right. And it's sort of like, oh, now if I go to counseling, that might be reportable. And it's not just in Department of Defense work. Again, it's Department of Energy. There are some fairly high-risk, dangerous jobs that are outside of the defense work where you have to certify, you have to take a drug test. And again, if you report that you've been in counseling, it complicates your employability. And so for those particular, we used to call them military operational specialties, but for those trades, it is complex. And so the first thing someone might do is say, well, maybe I'll self-treat, right? I'll try to figure this out on my own, right? And then they get into a cycle, and we don't get them, so it has a little bit of that stigma. We don't get them into treatment early enough, and by the time we recognize the problem, then it's a more severe problem.
I appreciate the honesty about that, Rich.
And then there's another problem after that, because it still is stigmatized. And if you go on in a coal mine or a factory or a construction site, and someone finds out that you're doing counseling, you're going to get ridiculed for a while. First it's good-natured, but then they bump you. But then it dissuades people, one, from getting help, and two, from staying with the help afterwards. So it's up to all of us, and we're trying this in all of our classes to try to teach the importance of it and to be open about it and to be able to talk about it and not stigmatize people because they have it. If you have cancer, no one stigmatizes you.
Right.
This is no different than any other medical condition that you may have, and we struggle with it because a lot of our people are just, well, you're inferior, you're weak, you shouldn't be doing that.
Seen as a weakness.
And so it's a strong educational program, and I would love to be able to sit here and look at you and say, we've conquered it, but we haven't. We're still fighting that every day.
Why are you all sitting here? Why did you all say, oh yeah, I'll come be on a panel? I'm curious what your motivation is. Rich, I'll start with you.
To do exactly what I just said, to talk about it, to start bringing it out so that this can be an accepted method, just like any other illness or condition you may have. These two conditions are exactly that way. I want to be able to talk about it. I want to be able to tell people that it is important for us to recognize the signs, to treat the signs, and not stigmatize the sign, but applaud somebody who actually has the courage to come forward and say, I have a problem, I need it. I don't understand this, but I need help. And so I'm here to do exactly that.
Nilka?
I would just say it's personal. I went through my own set of circumstances. For 5 years, I suffered from infertility issues. I lost babies. I went through really trying treatments. I was isolated and felt alone, and had my own sense of shame around my inability to have a baby, right? And so, 5 years is a long time to hold a lot of that information inside of you. And it wasn't until I was really willing to share my experiences with other people and open up and expose something that was so meaningful and real in my life that I actually was able to sort of get beyond that. And what I found through that conversation and that vulnerability is that there's so many people that were sitting right next to me that were going through the exact same thing, that were suffering in silence and showing up for work every day just with your mask on. And I can't underestimate how much time I wasted and how much suffering that I unnecessarily went through. And it's really important. And I think that we all have to, we all have to do our part, right? And even if it's just rubbing someone's back and, being there to support them during a tough moment, it means something. So if we can create workplaces where that's normal and that's natural and that's expected, then that's the type of company that I want to be a part of and work for.
Sonja?
Yeah, I would say a lot of similar thoughts as Richard too, that part of my motivation is to tell the story of some of the work we've done so that it's more commonplace for people to be talking about the stories, to hear, to really encourage other employers to invest their time and their resources into this space, because it is impactful. I think tech has done a great job of sort of, I guess, within benefits in general, we're constantly competing for talent, and this is a way that we can do that, but it's also about the person and trying to, sort of encourage others to also be thinking about how they can help support their employers and drive the conversation in their workplaces.
Yeah, I would just say I think we have a responsibility. People spend more time at work than they do at home. They spend more time with their coworkers than they do with their family. I don't think corporate America would say, well, we just rent you when you come to work. Is we really care about the whole person. And also mention, Kate, every time I do one of these, I'm sure it's true for everyone else, the emails I get, the letters, the employees that come up to me, we are trying to break that stigma and break that cycle. And the more we talk about it, the more people will talk to us about it. And the more people will identify problems, they will go to counseling, they will give us suggestions on ways that we can help. How do we spend our benefit dollars? Can we do that in a more efficient way? Can we provide better care to our employees that actually address some of the root causes and make a difference?
Well, I'm going to be talking more about my personal story at the night event tonight, so I won't answer my own question, but I'm here for a reason too. I think we're all here, and somebody said, everyone in this room is touched by these issues. I mean, even if it's not your own personal struggle, it's something in your family or your friend group. I want to thank you for being here, for taking the time out. I really do appreciate that. And I'm going to say goodbye to three of you. Roger, with the boot on, I think you can just sit here for a moment.
Thanks.
But thank you all so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Richard, thank you. So, our next two speakers, no surprise, Roger Crone will be one of them. They are united in their work and in their shared desire to make the world a better place. This story is truly inspiring, and I'm very happy that you're willing to share it today. So welcome back Roger Crone and his colleague, John Hinman.
I can stand. Well, Kate, thank you so much. In the pre-work up to the conference, we were asked if we could maybe go a little deeper and actually kind of illustrate a story, share a story of, kind of what Richard and the panel just talked about actually in action. And so I wanted to just relate one series of events that happened at our company that led us to taking an action and hopefully making a difference. A little bit about preview on Leidos. So we're 50 years old as a company. By the way, we're thrilled that no one knows who we are. It's actually okay. But for 40 of those 50 years, we were employee-owned. So owned by our employees, and that created a culture of empowerment and involvement, but it also creates a legacy where my view is the CEO, but we don't have an ivory tower. I kind of sit in an office on a floor with everybody else, but I feel like I work for the 33,000 employees that we have in our company. And I think, like a lot of CEOs today, I answer my own email, I get my own coffee, and my organization feels empowered to send me emails. And usually it's about the food in the cafeteria or the parking lot or one of those things. And what I thought I would do today with John's help is sort of relate a series of things that happened that led us to sort of enhance our program and to take some action around mental health and wellness. And what I'll ask John to do is to start by sort of describing some events that happened in John's life with his family and with his son Sean, and then we'll kind of pick it up from there. Okay. John.
In September 19th, 2016, my family lost our son Sean to a 15-year struggle with drug use, abuse, and eventually addiction. And my wife wrote his obituary, and we were public about his struggles, and that was posted in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And the Thursday, last viewing before he was cremated, his service was Friday, I sent the URL of his obituary to one of my colleagues, and the reason that I wanted to do so was because our boys played soccer against each other. We were from different municipalities, about 16 miles apart. So between the time they were 8 and 14, they at least saw each other twice a summer to play soccer. About a year and a half before Sean passed, this colleague informed me that their son was now an opioid addict, and I provided counseling on what could be done. I sent the URL. My wife asked me for a drink of water. I got her the drink of water, said I need to close my computer down. And when I got to the computer, it was seized with a virus. Called the corporate help desk to tell them that I needed to have this addressed, and told them why I had to push it off until later in the evening after 8 o'clock. 8:30, the phone rings. IT's on the phone. I explained, I apologized to the gentleman at the end, saying why I had to push off. And he laughs and he goes, dude, it's 5:30, I'm in California. And I told him the reason why I had to delay. And at the other end of the phone I hear, and he goes, my son's an opioid addict also. And at Sean's funeral that Friday, we received a call from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. The editor, one of the writers, Rich Lord, wanted to write a story about our loss. He does a series called Overdosed, and so he did. And those events combined to make me think about doing something about our loss. And it was in February of 2017 that I encapsulated all of that in a letter to Roger, and I simply entitled it A Father's Request. And basically I told him of what had transpired and asked if we could not be more and do more as a company. And we did.
I get a lot of emails. As I said, usually they're a couple sentences long, and again, it's whether we striped the parking lot correctly or something. And as I said, I read all my emails. Well, I hope most leaders in companies do that. This was very different. It was much longer, and I started reading it, and John described the situation with Sean and talked about the opioid epidemic. Now, this was several years ago, and I started reading and trying to comprehend what had happened. And I have been blessed. We have 3 kids, my wife and I. They're all healthy, they're employed, they have done reasonably well, although I've got cousins and nieces and nephews, right, that have had some issues. And so I walked down the hall to our head of community relations, public affairs, and I said, John talked about an epidemic around opioid addiction. What is that? You know, I don't know what that, I don't understand that there is I haven't read it in the newspapers, I don't see it on TV. What is this? So we started doing our research. We did touch base with John. John connected us with a lot of resources, Community Anti-Drug Coalition of America. We spent some time with the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency. Come to find, of course, where a lot of this started was in Portsmouth, Ohio, at one of the traditional pill mills. And so John works in Pittsburgh, it's almost ground zero, for the distribution of prescription and then illegal opioids. The number at that time was 65 to 70,000 people a year die from opioid overdose. More than the people that died in Korea and Vietnam combined, more than die from gunshots and automobile accidents in a year die of opioid addiction. And at Leidos, about 25% of the work that we do is around healthcare. We do healthcare, population health, big data, data analytics, electronic healthcare records. And you know, the challenge from John was really, you're a healthcare company, right? We're a people-oriented company. We used to be employee-owned. What are we doing both to help our employees and to help and combat this epidemic writ large?
A couple of weeks go by, and I get an email from the office of our Senior Vice President for Corporate Communications, Melissa Koskovich, requesting to set up a dialogue with me. We set the time. After the introductions, she interrupts me. She says, you have to stop talking. What you did doesn't happen very much in corporate America. You wrote a letter to the CEO. She said it was a respectful letter. It was an impactful letter. She goes, but you got through. And she said, before we say another word, there's something that Roger asked me to convey to you, his exact words. You broke me down. We're in, we're all in. And it's been that way ever since.
So it caused us to think, but we tend to be engineers. It's just who we are. We tend to think about things in that way, that problems can be addressed, problems can be solved if we think about them in an engineering way. And so we broke the problem down, and as you heard from the panel, we think there's a huge stigma and awareness issue. We think there's some things we can do that are preventive in nature. And then for those who do become addicted, there's treatment options. And so we broke our initiative down into 3 phases. We could spend the rest of our time going through each piece, but around awareness, as we've said before, we do events like these. I do town halls with our employees. By the way, every time I do a town hall with a group like this who are our employees, as I'm leaving, there is always 1 or 2 of our employees who are standing to talk to me at the door on the way out. And it's about, it could be Roxanne Woods and her son, it could be someone whose cousin, there's brother's son, a daughter, but there's, and you can see it on the way out, you can see it in their eyes that they have lived through this personal tragedy. By the way, in prevention, I could go on a lot of things. We do take-back bags, so you can pour your unused oxycodone into a bag, you can add water to it, and it inerts the drug. One thing that we did is, this is sort of a health conference, so we looked at our reimbursement policies and our benefits. And we went through our analytics. Again, we're engineers, and we said, within our own 33,000, what are we doing relative to OxyContin? And we found that if a doctor prescribed a month's supply, then we reimbursed the employee, the farmers, we're all self-insured for a month's supply. And we said, well, what if we cut that to we will only reimburse a week at a time? Right? But the incidence of addiction go up dramatically after the first 7 days. After 10 days, you are at high risk for being addicted. After a month, it's a significantly high number. So what we did is we changed our reimbursement policy, not that you couldn't have more than a week's prescription, you just had to go back and get it renewed, all right? And then we sat back. First of all, I thought I would have, an onslaught of complaints from employees, but we went back and we looked at the metrics. So, see if I can get this right. Before we changed our policy, something like 80% of the prescriptions that we reimbursed were for a period longer than 7 days. After we changed our policy, less than 20% of the prescriptions asked for an extension, okay, which meant that there were medicine cabinets out there across the country at the houses of our employees that had large unused dosages of Oxycontin, oxycodone, or Tylenol 3, which meant that was ripe pickings for their kids, their friends, people who are in their house, by way of criminal elements. But when they break into houses now, they don't look for your jewelry, they go to your medicine cabinet first. Because a pill of Oxycontin could be hundreds of dollars in the resale market. So we made a change in the way, and we're thrilled. And by the way, it was a win-win. Of course, we pay less in prescription reimbursements. Our employees have less of these drugs in their household. And then in treatment, lots of things that we're doing. One of the things I'm most proud of, we've partnered with a charitable foundation where we provide the Chris Atwood Foundation funds, and they buy something called naloxone or Narcan. If you're familiar with this issue, maybe the dark part about opioid addiction is that there literally is an antidote. And you can apply it through a nasal aspirator, and it is almost miraculous. It's like Lazarus coming back from the dead. And it, by the way, allows users to take more risk because of naloxone or Narcan. But what we do, we provide money to the Chris Atwood Foundation, and if you will go through training, so if you know when someone who's high risk or you have someone high risk in your family, then we will actually buy the Narcan for you or your family member if you go through and take the training. So that if, in point of fact, you find someone who has succumbed to an overdose, you have a fighting chance, right, to apply the antidote and have them recover. And again, lots of other things that we do across our employee base. Those are just a couple of the things.
As Roger has very clearly articulated, I think in my estimation, it's the simple and profound spirit of we're in, we're all in, that guides Leidos in its opioid campaign, both for our employees and externally as we seek to partner with corporate America. On a daily basis, I'm honored that my voice was heard. It's not that I spoke, it's that this man listened and that the entire corporation listened. I'm honored that my voice has been heard, proud of what Leidos has done, is doing, and inspired by what it is yet to do. And look forward to being a partner in this for the rest of my days as a Leidos employee.
Well, great, John. The last thing as we implemented parts of our program, it made me think how many other CEOs who have been blessed with a family like I have are just oblivious to the issue because they haven't had to confront it. And so I started talking to people that I know in the community, and I was a little bit surprised that CEOs in general were not as educated as maybe I had hoped that they would be. And so we started a CEO pledge and have established a website, and I have sent letters to everyone I know, all the CEOs in the Fortune 500, everyone I've ever come into contact with, a lot of private companies, where we provide educational material at the CEO level so they can see what we have done and how we have actually been able to make a difference in the communities in which we operate, frankly, how easy it is, how much it's aligned with, I think, the corporate culture that we all want. And we have had hundreds of CEOs sign the pledge and return it, and we are collecting those. And by the way, there's a picture on your screen. We were at a funding event with the president where he signed a bill that funded a lot of federal dollars for addressing this issue. But eventually we will take our CEO pledges and we will bind them up, and we have a White House event planned, again, along the lines of education awareness, because if we do it right up front and more people are aware that this is a huge problem and we can make a difference, then we get to spend much, much less on the backside, which is around the treatment of the opioid addiction. So we appreciate the opportunity to add this little personal touch to the panel, Kate, that we had, and just to let you all know that we actually can make a difference, and I think we can break the cycle, and whether it be mental health or addiction, I think there's a lot that we can do. And so, Patrick, we appreciate the opportunity to come up here and tell our story, and we turn it back to you. So thanks.
Thank you. Roger, what's the website? Leidos.com. Yeah.
Our website on the internet, and you can link straight from Leidos.com to the OPIOID-CEO pledge.
Thank you. I just
Again,
thought there might be people in the room that would like to see that pledge. Roger, John, I don't know where you went, John. Thank you so much for sharing a personal story. The next speaker doesn't really need an introduction. He's been here all day. You all know who he is. The Honorable Patrick Kennedy. He is the instigator for this whole day, the reason that we're all here, the leadership of the organization. You heard from him briefly this morning, but welcome back.
Thank you, Kate. Well, let's give a great round of applause for Kate Snow. What a terrific job she's done all day long. I remember earlier today when she was sitting back here, she kept looking around, wondering what time it was and how much time she had left, like a good media production person would. Problem is our clock was underneath the podium and you couldn't see it from where she was sitting. So when she kind of kept doing this, I've been there, and glad we got that fixed. And thanks for helping to keep things on time. Of course, when I get up, I just blow through whatever the time limits are. But I just want to thank you all again for being here today. And let me just say that I know many of you may have heard that the World Health Organization added burnout to its International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems. A handbook recognized medical conditions, and event production and public relations were both singled out as two of the top 10 highest burnout professions. So even before I knew that, I wanted to thank the people who made today possible. Cheryl Potts, where are you, Cheryl? In the back. Talk about pressure. Cheryl, stepping in. We've had a number of years of fantastic success in the Kennedy Forum, and no small feat to come in here and replicate that success and make it your own and add to that success with the way today has been put together. Thank you again to you. And I want to ask James Burns and David Lloyd, both of who have been part of our program. James is back there. Wave, James. And David, where's David? There in the back. So David, many of you know this is a Chicago organization, but you may also know that the Kennedy Forum Illinois provides support to states all across the country who are looking to improve their state laws and their state regulations and oversight. And David Lloyd has become known as the go-to guy across the country if a state legislator wants to write a good law that helps to advance this cause. And because of all of you in supporting the Kennedy Forum, he's able to answer those calls. So I want to thank all of you for the support, because it's not just to pull off this event. This support allows us to build a very vigilant advocacy, which, by the way, works with all of our fellow advocacy organizations, NAMI, Mental Health America, DBSA, all of our friends in Facing Addiction, and Faces and Voices of Recovery, and all of them. And I have to tell you, when it comes to parity, there's one phone call people make, and it all goes to David and our team here and the ones that he's put together. So you also should feel a great sense of pride at the fact that little KFI is actually leading the charge nationally on these issues. And I want to thank Sarah Newcomb and Matt Woodburn and Dan Cole and Meredith DeBuff and Maureen Murray and Kate Boyer and everyone else at ESP Presents, with Amy Walsh and Sarah Ruth and Melissa Harris and Deborah Shelton. Thank you all for helping to make today possible. I want to thank, I don't know if my good friend John Boyd is still here, but John runs Sutter Health, which is a health system out in California, and he has been supportive of Kennedy Forum, as has Kaiser, and all of these national organizations, many of whom don't even have any footprint here in Illinois. But the reason they do that is because what's going on here helps them back in their states. So I want to thank John and Sutter Health for their contributions and what they're doing to take the lessons learned, if you can believe it, from here and take it back to California. Not a bad sign that you guys get to give some learnings and teach a little bit to your California brothers and sisters who have been so involved in helping to sponsor this event. I also want to say a welcome to our North Carolina friend, Patrick Conway, who's the CEO of one of the top 8 biggest Blue Cross Blue Shield plans in the nation, and who, before his real claim to fame in my book, was when he ran the biggest health insurer in the country. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, you might have heard of that. And he was the chief medical officer of CMS, and under his watch, he was the one who instituted collaborative care codes. And for those of you who aren't intimate to what changing this system looks like, it means paying for different services. So instead of paying for one and done services where your mental health is siloed from the rest of your primary care, he was the one who pushed through what was then known as G codes, which was the beginning of CMS reimbursing for when a primary care doc could talk to a psychiatrist and get input on how to best take care of their patient and be a better primary care doc, and also to work with other health professionals, because as you know, the big key for mental health treatment is coordinated care. And you can't have coordinated care unless you have a different reimbursement system. And I'll never forget when Patrick pushed that through, and when CMS adopts a new payment mode, guess what? It automatically gets adopted by all the other payers in the country. That's the power of being the biggest payer in the country. We owe a great gratitude to Patrick Conway for doing that. So give Patrick a Conway. Please, Patrick, will you stand up? I don't know if you actually caught a glimpse of him when he stood up, but he kind of has that reddish complexion that I have. And with a name like Conway, it's no surprise he's got a busy life. When he was CMS Chief Medical Officer, but he somehow found time to tell his staff, whatever you do, you gotta let me answer Patrick Kennedy's invitation to come to the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport and the Kennedy house that John F. Kennedy grew up in. And because, of course, a lot of people want to see him. He was, a very sought-after guy, and of course, they made the time. It had nothing to do with his last name being Conway or the fact that his 5 Irish-looking children got to have their picture taken in front of John F. Kennedy's rocker. And I say, if the Kennedy name can help do anything, if it can help the lead medical officer for the lead payer in this country come and listen to the impact model once again. Not like he hadn't heard it before, but everyone else was better healed with more influence than mental health. And that's the reason we're in the situation we're in today, is because the decision makers in this country don't always hear our story, because we're not the ones with the big influence. And I am so grateful. Patrick Conway said to me, Patrick, what do you need me to say? Because, by the way, once I knew he was coming, I invited all of the big insurers to come. And once they knew Patrick Conway, they all came, even though I wasn't always very nice to them. On the parity issue, they all still decided. So he said, when we went to get the Cape Cod potato chips and lobster rolls, he said, what do you want me to say when they come back? And I said, I want you to say that you think that our proposals at the Kennedy Forum are excellent proposals, and that you might just go ahead and implement the new RFPs for collaborative care codes on your way back from the Cape. And when you know, he did that with a straight face. Even though he meant it, he really doubled down. And like Sam Nussbaum and a bunch of others from various insurers literally dropped their lobster rolls in order to email headquarters to tell them that this is what the chief medical officer had just said at CMS. So he has been a great leader, and if we see innovations come, I think you'll see many of them come out of North Carolina because of what he's trying to do in his new role as CEO of North Carolina Blue. So enough of you, Patrick. I've said too many nice things about you. Obviously, all of you know that we wouldn't be here once again. I mean, if it weren't for our good friend Peter and Mimi O'Brien. And of course, we're going to have a chance to celebrate tonight and be together, but I'll always keep coming back to the fact that this really ought to be called the O'Brien Forum. But if he doesn't mind, I'll still take credit for it. And he'll But Mado is, and the O'Briens have made this forum possible every year, year in and year out, before we even know whether we're going to get a good return or who's going to come or who's going to donate. Peter O'Brien is there to help support this. And I'm so grateful that, as I said before, we have Kaiser Permanente coming in and being our big supporter for this. And I am so excited that they're going to look to try to take some of the lessons learned, again, from this meeting here and bring them back to California. They've got a dynamic new governor, Governor Gavin Newsom out there, who's dynamo, who's going to really make this a top priority. He's already hired Tom Insel, many of us know in the advocacy world, as his mental health czar. They've got new initiatives, not only the tax millionaires proposal from Prop 63, which has pumped in billions of dollars into the California mental health, but they also have these new propositions that have just passed in San Francisco for housing, because of course the housing crisis has been so bad in San Francisco. In other words, they've got lots of things that are going on. And with Kaiser's holistic integrated model, and with them looking at population health as they do, you know, we need to find wherever the best practices are, wherever they are, and then we're going to take it. You better come up with it, because wherever you come up with a win in Northern California or anywhere in California, we're happy to be the beneficiary of all your good work and investment. So I want to thank you for working in this space. And by the way, we'll be happy to help you if we can be helpful to you in any way in doing that. So I just want to say all of you have, of course, heard from a great series of panels. We're going to have a great event this evening at the Harris Theater. I don't know how many of you are signed up to go to that. Looking forward to going to that. That should be a lot of fun. And I hope that you're able to come over. And as far as the summation for today, all I would say is that when you think that we're actually making a difference, all I do to put things in perspective is think of what we were doing against other major health crises in this country. And I know that we are often celebrating great, White House ceremonies that commit to certain dollars or so forth. None of those is worthy of the size and scale of this crisis. When we were losing 53, I say it all over and over again because I need to get this message out. When we were losing 53,000 Americans every year to HIV/AIDS, we were spending $24 billion a year. And we saw HIV rates, death rates drop precipitously in the ensuing years. 25 billion, 25 billion, 25 billion. Now it's a chronic illness, not a death sentence. 53,000. We're losing nearly 50,000 from suicide itself. Another 72,000 from overdose. We're well over twice the number of people dying that died during the HIV/AIDS crisis. And what's our nation's response? 6 billion. 6 billion for 120,000 lives lost a year. It's worth saying that when we think we're doing something, my friends, we're still in denial because we really can't absorb, how far off it is that we really need to be in terms of going towards the root of this crisis. So I just would say to all of you, it's a sobering thought that we have all of the work that we have in front of us. But I want you to know, we can't make a difference if we just try and try to break that stigma and try to break that denial. And today you had a very uplifting series of presentations. You had a mayor say that she was wanting to make this a big priority as the new mayor of Chicago. You had a governor who committed to being a leader and already has demonstrated that through his budget. And you had an attorney general from Illinois commit to not only being the primary sponsor of the Illinois parity law, but being the leader as an attorney general in enforcing it. And you had a slew of folks talk about what leadership in the workplace looked like, including from some of our labor leaders and international labor union presidents. I would say to you, that's uplifting. So even though we can kind of get down on the fact that we're not going where we need to go on the national level, we can, I think in Illinois, take great comfort that because of the activism of many in this room, that's not the case here in Illinois. You've got real activism and real leadership here in Illinois, and we're very grateful for that. I now just want to say I think we have a performance right now. So if our band could come up, I want to introduce our very special guest performer who is going to put down some lyrics called Get Off the Phone, Wake Up. Those are two good mantras just to start off with for good mental health. And then here's the best one, and dance. Get off the phone, wake up, and dance. Robert Byrne, thank you very much for being here and giving us these important messages through your gift of music. We're grateful to have you and have you as a partner for our efforts.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
First thing in the morning, you wake up in the bed, you check up on the gram, it's all that's in your head. You turn into a robot, they now control your mind. We look inside your head, and this is what we find. You can be a Superman on Instagram. Ha, 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 ha. It just takes a random act to change the world. Stand up and get off the phone.
I want everyone out their seat right now. Come on, everyone, let's stand up.
First thing in the morning, you wake up in the bed, you check up on the gram, that's all that's in your head. You turn into a robot, they now control your mind. You look inside your head, and this is what we find. You could be a Superman on Instagram. It just takes a random act to change the world. Stand up and get off the phone. Just get off the phone, wake up and dance. Take back your life, stop living in a trance. Get off the phone, wake up, caress. Let's burn off the stress till the dawn meets the night. Little Mary hashtag opens up her bag and tells us the story of her life. Story of her life. I read what you said, read what you said. I heard what you said. You ain't saying nothing. You ain't saying nothing. I know what you said, know what you said. I read what you said, read what you said. I heard what you said. You ain't saying nothing. Just get off the phone, wake up and dance. Take back your life. Stop living in a trance. Get off the phone, wake up, caress. Let's burn off the stress till the dawn meets the night. Get off the phone, wake up and dance. Take back your life. Stop living in a trance. Get off the phone, wake up, caress. Let's burn off the stress till the dawn meets the night. Get off the phone, wake up. Get off the phone, wake up. Get off the phone, wake up. Get off your phone, wake up. Get off your phone, wake up. Lyft. Get off your phone, wake up. Just get off your phone, wake up and dance. Take back your life. Facebook, living in a trance. Get off your phone, wake up, caress. Let's burn off the stress till the dawn meets the night. Get off the phone, wake up and dance. Take back your life. Stop living in a trance. Get off the phone, wake up,